What's up? How we doing? The most beautiful sound in the world. Anyway, I don't have shit planned tonight. I just wanted to show off that, I'm getting things back to the way they were slowly, and I had to make some changes so the stuff would work.
Are you fucking getting it yet?
See, that's back, but I had to do it a different way. See, I've invited a bunch of loony leftists over yet again, yet nobody will show up. So, what's the first thing I want to really jump into? All this shit about this song. Oh, what the hell is it called? Try that in a small town. Everybody's losing their shit about this fucking, the cult, the loony leftist cult. Although, I might actually catch a copyright here, but, I actually want to show the video and see if we can, if someone sees a black American in there, or even a lynching, could you let me know? Personally, I think he misnamed the song. If he had called it what it actually shows, he should have called the song, "Hey, Loony Leftists, fuck around and find out." That's what he should have called it. And then had a lot of pictures of like Kyle Rittenhouse in there, you know? So I might catch copyright here, but I want everybody to watch this. If you can see something racist in there, please let me, I've watched the video a couple times trying to see something racist, and all I can see is a bunch of loony leftists showing their ass. That's all I can see. So I'm going to risk a copyright here just for the sake of, you know,
Sucker punch somebody on a sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool, act a fool if you like, cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag.
Oh yeah, that's African American right there.
Yeah, you think it's tough? Well, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't.
By the way, Antifa, you are the whitest group I have ever fucking seen.
Got a gun that my granddad gave me. They say one day they're gonna round up. Well, that shit might fly in the city. Good luck, try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You don't. Try that in a small town full of good old boys, raised up right. If you're looking for a fight, try that in a small town. Try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Round here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town.
These farmers are dropping their own in need, and they've come to help.
It's what this community and a lot of our communities stand for. Somebody needs some help, you'll get it.
Try that in a small town.
Now I know why the loony left doesn't like that song or they want it taken off. Because it shows the loony left showing their ass. And that's why they don't like this song. Because here's to you, fucktards.
Whining morons, hear them cry. Never face you eye to eye. One on one, they'd get knocked down. Antifa is a bunch of clowns. Safety pins upon their chest. They have no jobs, not like the rest. They pay no bills, don't pay their way. These idiots should go away. They wear their masks and scream and yell, throwing punches not very well. The internet is where they fight. They hate the fact I have gun rights. Whining morons, hear them cry. They'll never face you eye to eye. One on one, they'd get knocked down. Antifa is a bunch of clowns. They think they're tough and try to scare. I tilt my head and laugh and stare. They pepper spray teenage girls. Someday they'll meet the real world. Whining morons, hear them cry. They'll never face you eye to eye. One on one, they'd get knocked down. Antifa is a bunch of clowns.
Well, actually, it's a what they call a parody. It's the Ballad of the Green Berets, but I call it the Ballad of the Safety Pin, because what a bunch of pussies. I did one called Facebook Prison Blues, repeat offender, that was to Folsom Prison Blues. By the way, you're back, in the mix. I just had to do it a little differently. So I had to do it a little differently in order to make that work. So, hey, whatever. Anyway, what else? Oh, did you hear? Like, let me look this up, find shit out. Let's go to this. Reserves. Biden calls up reserves. There's military struggles. Oh, it's Fox News. I try not to use Fox News, but it's here. President Biden's move to authorize calling up to 3,000 reservists to augment U.S. forces in Europe comes as the military struggles to recruit enough troops to the active duty ranks. Maybe it's because people are too fucking fat, too stupid, too lazy, and nobody wants to sit through a fucking where was I? Oh, there it is. Okay. Is that? Yeah, that's. Where was I? Yeah, I'm having to run this like on bare bones now. The order follows Russia's invasion of Ukraine, entering a new phase of unpredictability. Most notably was an apparent coup attempt by Russia's private military company, the Wagner Group, which ended with thousands of its fighters reportedly taking new homes in Belarus, raising fears about the vulnerability of NATO's eastern flank. Russia's war with Ukraine has prompted the U.S. to beef up its presence in Europe, with the Pentagon deploying an additional 20,000 troops to the continent since the conflict began last year. Has anybody noticed, like the last administration, not a single war? The increased rotations to international theater has strained the military, which was already battling its worst recruiting crisis in decades when the war in Ukraine began. Maybe it's because, I don't know, people got left behind in Afghanistan and nobody wants to sit through an hour-long PowerPoint presentation about your fucking made-up pronouns. Go fuck yourself. Exactly. Diversity training. Nobody wants to sit through your pronouns are fuckface. Why? Because you're a fuckface. That's why. You're private fuckface. Those are your pronouns. We're not doing made up fucking pronouns. I am so glad I'm fucking retired. Go fuck yourself, people. I've invited a bunch of loony leftists in here. Nobody wants to come in and play. Why? I'll fucking destroy them. They know it because I do it. They would rather talk their shit on like Instagram where you can't share links or you have to put up or shut up. Why would I want to come over there where I can fucking kick your ass? That's why you won't come over here. Anyway, what else is going on? Of course, with I think I talked about that last week. The cocaine in the White House. We don't know whose it is. You mean you can't lift a pair of fucking fingerprints off a bag? I've watched CSI, folks. And chat's open. I can read it right here. I mean, if there were a loony leftist in here, they'd already be losing their shit. And then, yeah, they were told not to. Don't find out who it was, or don't say who it was. We can't. Yeah, you can't be doing that. No, it's because then Sniffy Joe loses his millions because he could actually get thrown out of office, and China loses its employee of the month. The one, the greatest polluter on the planet, China, and our president, who is an employee of China, is trying to fuck us. Where do you think all these batteries are going to come from for these electric cars? China, maybe? Could that be why there's kickbacks coming from China and why he's trying to do this, like, electric car bullshit? You think? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. As Jimmy would say, I'm just thinking out loud.
Are you fucking getting it yet?
Our country isn't run from the White House. It's run from a bunch of other countries. it depends on where the money comes from. If Big Pharma could come up with more money than China, the country of China, Big Pharma would be running our country, or well, your country. Well, it's my country still. I can still vote, but I just don't live there because I really just can't put up with the fucking loony left shit. Anyway, I'm waiting for like a loony leftist, somebody to say something that they want to talk about. Like, what was it? I had a saying about the diversity training. When they always talk about the recruiting problems they're having. What's that? The Army has changed its recruiting slogan from Army Strong to "You'll probably," or "We can't win a war. You'll probably get left behind. We'll give the enemy $85 billion in military equipment, but hey, we're woke as fuck." I've been waiting for a lunet because I have all my, like, what's a woman? I can define it. Yeah, they're not. Nobody's getting it. Nobody's getting that you don't run your country. You can elect who you want. It's where the money comes from. How does a president, this guy's been a senator for what? He's been in politics 50 years. How does a senator and the president, all six-figure-a-year jobs, how are they all millionaires? It's a six-figure-a-year job. More than I made working for the government, but still, it's only six figures. How do you become a multimillionaire? Six figures. Trump lost money. Because how did, I think the Clintons were worth, like, when they got into the White House, like $250,000. Okay, respectable. They were lawyers. Now they're multi-millionaires. How the fuck does that happen? And don't tell me, oh, they're selling books. Who the fuck would buy a book by those people? Unless it were like, you know, a how-to on how to commit crime and get away with it. How to suicide somebody without getting caught. Oh shit! I said the S word. You can't use it on YouTube. The voluntarily non-existing. And then my cult thing. They don't like that when they get called a cult. But what do they do after I call them a cult? Do everything that's on my list to prove they're a cult. I think it's, which one is it? Number 40 something, 38, 39. Let's see, where is it? Q will lose your shit. It will not occur to, it will not, 43. It will not occur to you that if people can simply copy and paste their counter arguments, you might be programmed, you know, like in a cult. I was, and I used the Branch Davidians as an example of a cult. See, the Branch Davidians, David Koresh thought he was God. His followers also thought he was a God. We have people out there that believe men can get pregnant. That's a fucking cult, because it's not true. If you believe reality isn't real, you're probably in a fucking cult. Ain't nobody getting it. They always bring up, like, my favorite. They always bring up these ancient societies to prove that transgenderism exists. You know, in ancient Greece, where the fuck is ancient Greece now? Where is it? They used to make people fight in the Colosseum too. I'm not above that. I'm not against that. I think, you know, if you're a scumbag lowlife, we'll put you to some use. Entertainment. We'll put it on fucking pay-per-view. Maybe with the taxes alone from the pay-per-view, we could pay off some of this national debt, huh? Of course, some of you wouldn't be much of a fight, because holy shit, our loony left is such pussies. Oh my God, a song sent them into a fucking frenzy. A song about the loony left showing their ass. That's what it is. He mistitled it, though. He should have called it, "Hey, loony leftist, fuck around and find out." Drinking Amstel tonight because I still like want to get a loony leftist in here because and then what is it? Oh, I'm a Nazi, fascist, all that good shit. Although, you know,
Don't call me a Nazi or a fascist. I'm not a socialist. We shall banish want. We shall banish fear. The essence of socialism is human welfare rooted in a fuller life for every American from childhood to old age. Wow, sound familiar? Guess who said it? Bernie Sanders? AOC? Joe Biden, perhaps? Nope. Adolf Hitler. I just replaced the word German with American.
Tell me again who the fucking fascists are. They're the assholes setting fire to your fucking house. That's who the fascists are. That's in my, you're in a cult if, you know. You're set fire to someone's business while calling them the fascist. Fucking retards. And of course they get upset. Oh yeah, the other night I had the party switch myth again. It couldn't be just there aren't that many racists left around that you have to invent it now. No, everything is racist now. It's called CRT. However, somehow we switched parties. I'm trying to figure out how that happened. Me holding you responsible, I guess, is racist. Personally responsible for your behavior is racist. Go fuck yourself. If you break into my house and I whoop your ass, I ain't looking at your skin color. Well, I'm looking for the best place to leave the bruises. But yeah, someone said that the other day. They switched parties. Really? Okay.
Once upon a time, every student of history, and that meant pretty much everyone with a high school education, knew this. The Democratic Party was the party of slavery and Jim Crow, and the Republican Party was the party of emancipation and racial integration. Democrats were the Confederacy, and Republicans were the Union. Jim Crow Democrats were dominant in the South, and socially tolerant Republicans were dominant in the North. But then, in the 1960s and 70s, everything supposedly flipped. Suddenly, the Republicans became the racists, and the Democrats became the champions of civil rights. Fabricated by left-leaning academic elites and journalists, the story went like this. Republicans couldn't win a national election by appealing to the better nature of the country. They could only win by appealing to the worst. Attributed to Richard Nixon, the media's all-purpose bad guy, this came to be known as the Southern Strategy. It was very simple. Win elections by winning the South. And to win the South, appeal to racists. So the Republicans, the party of Lincoln, were to now be labeled the party of rednecks. But this story of the two parties switching identities is a myth. In fact, it's three myths wrapped into one false narrative. Let's take a brief look at each myth in turn. Myth number one. In order to be competitive in the South, Republicans started to pander to white racists in the 1960s. Fact, Republicans actually became competitive in the South as early as 1928 when Republican Herbert Hoover won over 47% of the South's popular vote against Democrat Al Smith. In 1952, Republican President Dwight Eisenhower won the southern states of Tennessee, Florida, and Virginia. And in 1956, he picked up Louisiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia too. And that was after he supported the Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education that desegregated public schools, and after he sent the 101st Airborne to Little Rock Central High School to enforce integration. Myth number two, Southern Democrats, angry with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, switched parties. Fact, of the 21 Democratic senators who opposed the Civil Rights Act, just one became a Republican. The other 20 continued to be elected as Democrats or were replaced by other Democrats. On average, those 20 seats didn't go Republican for another 2.5 decades. Myth number three. Since the implementation of the Southern Strategy, the Republicans have dominated the South. Fact, Richard Nixon, the man who is often credited with creating the Southern Strategy, lost the Deep South in 1968. In contrast, Democrat Jimmy Carter nearly swept the region in 1976, 12 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in 1992, over 28 years later, Democrat Bill Clinton won Georgia, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The truth is, Republicans didn't hold a majority of Southern congressional seats until 1994, 30 years after the Civil Rights Act. As Kevin Williamson of National Review writes, if Southern rednecks ditched the Democrats because of a civil rights law passed in 1964, it is strange that they waited until the late 1980s and early 1990s to do so. They say things move slower in the South, but not that slow. So what really happened? Why does the South now vote overwhelmingly Republican? Because the South itself has changed. Its values have changed. The racism that once defined it doesn't anymore. Its values today are conservative ones, pro-life, pro-gun, and pro-small government. And here's the proof. Southern whites are far more likely to vote for a black conservative like Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina than a white liberal. In short, history has moved on. Like other regions of the country, the South votes values, not skin color. The myth of the Southern strategy is just the Democrats' excuse for losing the South, and yet another way to smear Republicans with the label racist. Don't buy it. I'm Carol Swain, professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University.
Basically, it's the Democrats don't have a platform to run on. They were the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow. Between 1881 and 1951, the Democrat Party lynched an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 black Americans and their supporters. They have to do this party switch myth thing because, you know, if the Democrats weren't the party of racism, then why are places like Chicago and New Orleans so bad for black Americans to live, you know, as far as crime and poverty, when they haven't, for instance, Chicago hasn't elected a Republican mayor since 1932. New Orleans, 1870. So I'll tell you, it's politics. They're lying, folks.
The victims of the Democratic playing card deck. This group makes up the core of the voting element as far as the Democratic Party goes, and thus helps the most to promote the leftist cause. These are the people who think they've been wrong or disadvantaged, or have been told that they've been wronged or disadvantaged. They're also being told that the opposing parties, Republicans and conservatives, are out to wrong them and disadvantage them even further. These are the things commonly referred to as playing the race/age/gender/class card. This is used very often by liberals, so get ready to hear a lot of it. It works, it is effective, and this second group of people, the victims, falls for it very easily. As a result, they become slaves of the liberal mindset. Look no further than how the Democrats try to scare African Americans into believing that Republicans are holding them down, how the Democrats try to scare middle-class Americans into thinking Republicans are hurting the middle class, and how the Democrats try to scare women into thinking Republicans are against their rights. Democrats also frequently try to scare senior citizens into thinking Republicans want to destroy Social Security. Look at the key words mentioned in these accusations: against, holding down, hurting, destroying. In essence, it is fear-mongering targeted at certain groups of people in society, and it works. These Democrats and leftists attempt to spin the issues into backing up this fear-mongering, and people listen to it. And as a result, this entire second group is formed the victims of the Democratic playing card deck. These people often do not know much about the issues, especially as far as fact and reality goes. What they do think they know, however, is that Republicans and conservatives are completely against them and trying to hold them down, or their issue, in general. They believe the way they do, because of the total spin and fear-mongering they hear from Democratic and liberal leaders. They then go out and vote for these said Democrats, and become strong leftists, mostly out of fear and loathing of the other side values instilled into them. Furthermore, they become very likely to start calling conservatives bigots and racists, because of the lies that the liberal left has drilled into their heads.
Are you fucking getting it yet?
They don't want you thinking for yourselves, folks. It's called, they did it to the slaves too. That's why they weren't allowed to learn to read and write. They did not want them thinking for themselves. You're still on their plantation. This plantation is, instead of using chains and whips and stuff like that, they use lies, basically. And they lie to us all. Like, do you realize that I get called racist by more white people than black people? Matter of fact, the people that call me racist don't even have a fucking tan. Get out of your mom's basement, folks. Like, if you're going to call me racist, at least have a tan, okay? Just like Antifa, the whitest group I have ever fucking seen. You, like, holy shit. You make even the KKK down south would have a fucking tan. Holy shit. But, what else can I get into tonight? I was hoping the loony leftists would come over here because I was ready for anything. Like gender ideology, I was ready for socialism, I was ready for the Trump unacceptance and resistance disorder challenge. Ready for that. All of them. Like CRT, I was ready for CRT. That was part of CRT, is this populist bomb bullshit of them trying to say everybody's racist. Nobody's racist. There are fewer racists today. They're trying to pass it off that America is more racist than the 1960s. How the fuck is that possible? No, you're just using the 1960s type racism as an excuse to be an asshole. Oh, what? There's one. Oh, and you're in a cult if you believe out of 7 billion people on the planet, straight white men are oppressing everyone else. And then below that it says, you're in a cult if you get triggered when someone tells you you're not oppressed, you're just fucking stupid. That's literally what's going on. Let's see. Another one that this one actually got taken down from YouTube because it really lays out the woke the cult that is the loony left.
Why must the loony left continue to lie? Do they not realize that people have eyes, they see things? The View yesterday, the right is going further right, while the left is staying just left of center. Joseph Goebbels would be in awe. The last time I saw such blatant lying on television was when Baghdad Bob was on CNN saying, "There are no American troops in Baghdad, and we are driving back the invaders." The sad thing is, there are people who want to believe them so much that they, as the article I present later says, cover their ears, run away, and scream abuse from a safe distance.
It's called a cult.
Elon Musk's right. The left has gone insane. Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter has many on the political left vowing to close their accounts or boycotting the social media giant. Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter has many on the political left vowing to close their accounts or boycotting the site. Elon Musk sparked a firestorm this week by tweeting a meme that calls out the radical drift of left-wing politics in America, showing how the rise of the ultra-left has made people like him suddenly seem right of center, though their views haven't changed. Why the furor? Because the meme is right. As he explained in a follow-up, I strongly supported Obama for president, but today's Democratic Party has been hijacked by extremists. The American left has, over the past decade and a half, gone insane. Firm support for affirmative action was overtaken by the insanity of anti-racism and critical race theory. Rather than accepting LGBTQ people, the litmus test became embracing gender transition for kids, mandatory use of preferred pronouns and denial of the obvious facts about trans athletes. Criticism of law enforcement excesses morphed into defund and abolish. Supporting immigration into outright opposition to any border control. That's to say nothing of free speech. An American left that long cherished it now deems it an insidious form of white supremacy. And it all comes packaged in fury at anyone who hasn't gone along, let alone those who dissent. The screaming over Musk's Twitter acquisition proves the contemporary left has no place for someone who believes in equality and not being an asshole over trivial things, as Musk has shown he believes. Millions of non-billionaire Americans feel the same way, even if the left's capture of most media obscures that fact. It's a big reason all the polls show Democrats facing disaster in November. Across all race and class lines, voters reject the far-left lunacy. Most people in this country don't intensely hate anyone who mildly disagrees with them. We generally don't demand ideological fealty as a prerequisite for friendship or simple coexistence. We tend to care about the same things: jobs, safety, and our kids. And we do believe in equality and forbearance. As Musk tweeted Friday, the far left hates everyone, themselves included. He followed up with, "But I'm no fan of the far right either. Let's have less hate and more love." That sharing such widely held sentiments gets you painted as a right-wing radical only further proves how right that meme is. Radical left wokeness and its farcical revolution. An article by Matteo Gemolo. Dr. Matteo Gemolo, a doctor in philosophy at Cardiff University and an independent political commentator. He writes about politics, human rights, freedom of speech, and secularism. He is project leader for policy papers on human rights and religions, and collaborates with LGBTI Liberals for Europe, Certi Diritti, and European Liberal
It's called
Forum.
mail-in ballots.
Although it may deceive many of us by looking extremely surreal, wokeness has never been more real than now. Right at this moment, as I am sketching a critical piece on this topic, and I am trying to find inspiration for its introduction, a couple of people are sat next to me in the cafe where I usually work on my articles. As luck would have it, they are discussing one of the hottest topics of today's politics, trans issues.
If anybody thinks this fucking retard got 81
I raise
million
my
votes,
head from my laptop to give a quick glance at the loud flim-flam.
They're in a
white,
cult.
young blondish girl with a bit of facial hair timidly growing in the shape of a beard is chit-chatting with an extremely tall and muscular black dude in his 20s, wearing a well-groomed mustache and a flashy red skirt. It is indeed difficult for me to guess their invisible gender identities, which, in other circumstances, I would find completely irrelevant. But what is interesting in this case is what they are telling each other because of their gender identity. They talk about that one time when they went together to the sauna that stands just in front of our cafe. That place is called Macho Sauna, and it is a well-known haunt in the center of Brussels, conceived for those penis people who want to share the warmth of a steam room with other penis people who, until not so long ago, we called gays. With visible, and, unfortunately, audible, disdain, the couple is ridiculing the person who works at the entrance of the sauna, not for refusing their entrance, but for the opposite reason, welcoming them. Apparently, once granted the permission to join the club with an over-enthusiastic, "I am so glad to finally have two transgender people entering our sauna to make it more inclusive," they found themselves upset by the whole experience. The atmosphere inside the jacuzzi was, how to put this, too phallocentric. After all, this is clearly unthinkable in a gay club called Macho Sauna. No matter how inclusive the act of welcoming a biological woman who identifies as a man in a gay sauna was, the big step taken on the pilgrimage route to Santiago de Inclusivila was not enough. In truth, no step on such a pathway ever seems to be enough. Demanding the impossible. No matter how hard we might twist language and idioms, no matter how inclusive we want our society to be, no matter how much we can bend logic and common sense, demands from the woke brigade are never meant to be satisfied. There is a very simple reason for that. What we call social justice is in fact extremely antisocial and deeply unjust. As a regressive and perverted offshoot of the civil rights movements of the 1960s and 70s, it is not invested in promoting equality between individuals anymore, guaranteeing equal opportunities to every person, no matter their social status, provenance, cultural and religious background, gender, or sexuality or backward political stances in the current hard-left agenda. Contrary to last century's battles for equal opportunities, for the right to vote, for the ability to divorce, for the legalization of abortion, for the abolition of racial segregation, or the decriminalization of sodomy, what social justice warriors in the 21st century fight against are invisible enemies: white privilege, patriarchy, cultural colonialism, gender binarism. How to defeat such utopian opponents, if not through the deformation of what philosophers call logos? Language must be reviewed and reformed to become inclusive and gender-neutral in order to avoid imperceptible offenses and microaggressions, whatever this means. Postmodern narratives need to be promoted at any educational level, through brand new disciplines such as critical race theory and gender and post-colonial studies, to ensure new generation will have no other means to look at the world other than the distorted lens of biased and radical political ideologies. Old symbols, statues, flags, names of public spaces, which used to unify a nation, its people, and its culture must be destroyed in name of cultural relativism. Uprooting heresy. Old liberal concepts, such as freedom of thought and speech, look more and more like endangered species. Free thinkers are falling off the radar in environments where their voice should count the most. Universities, media, and politics. The list of academics forced to resign from American and British universities for committing woke felony grows in a worrying number day after day. Jordan Peterson, Germaine Greer, Selena Todd, Felix Ngolle, Rosa Friedman, Tim Hunt, Joe Phoenix, Noah Carl, Amber Rudd, Jenny Murray, to name but a few of the most known, have all experienced different degrees of censorship in British campuses over the last few years. The latest of this lineup of heretics is Professor Tim Luckhurst from Durham University, UK, who is currently suspended from its duties for the capital crime of, God forbid, inviting conservative journalist Rod Little to speak at a Christmas dinner party in early December last year. The hard-left student mob, who decided to boycott the dinner before Little could even start saying his piece, is showing to us, once again, its inability to cope with alternative views. Unable to listen, they prefer, instead, to brand intellectuals whose articles and books they have never read, and never will, as disgusting. These kids have never had their views challenged, they have never been gainsaid. Through years of secondary school, their worldview has been created in a vacuum, every shibboleth, no matter how absurd, indulged by their teachers. They are wholly unfamiliar with the notion of an opposing argument. And so, when they meet one, their response is to run away with their hands over their ears and then scream abuse from a safe distance. Cancel culture is a new form of conformism, spreading like mushrooms on a rotting tree, attacking the roots of common sense, rationality, logic, linear and critical thinking, and causing all of them to decay. Stronger than ever, woke conformists have appointed themselves the avant-garde of progress. Everything falling outside of the hard left side of Western politics is at risk of being condemned as a form of bigotry and therefore repressed. Just because you can no longer say your opinion in the New York Times doesn't mean you're being silenced. You just can't share it in the New York Times, explains the former liberal and currently regressive mainstream left. According to CanceledPeople.com database, more than 200 people, mostly academics, journalists, and intellectuals, have either resigned or have been fired recently because their views had in some way caused offense. Numbers have been exponentially growing since 2018. In 2021 alone, almost 1,500 people submitted cases to FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, because they believed their rights were in jeopardy. The new faith. Rather than politics and ideology, we should speak of religion and creed. Cancel culture has become a merciless crusade fought by a woke-possessed brigade, armed with tambourines and rooster haircuts, which shouts at sinners, repent. Repent. Repent, motherfucker. This is not a metaphor, but a surreal scene which took place in October last year at Netflix headquarters in California, when the American comedian and YouTuber Vito Gesualdi took to the street to defend Dave Chappelle over allegations of transphobia. The preachers of cancel culture wish they could tear down all shows, books, and statues which do not perfectly align with the most up-to-date ethics of our time. In the United States, at least 130 monuments have been either toppled by protesters or removed by city councils over the last couple of years, more than 500
Democrats
around the
tearing
globe
down
since George Floyd
statues of
protests.
Democrats because
This is a
they're
masterpiece
racist.
of damnatio memoriae, condemnation of memory, inspired by a very successful medieval practice which consisted in excluding the heretics from any official historical account. The uncreative and tyrannical aspects of such an operation are worryingly echoing the darkest trends in human nature, seen in the destruction of monuments in the Middle East at the hands of Islamic State, ISIS, and other Islamist groups. As with any other form of radicalized religion, the intolerance towards apostates from the cancel culture sect is, if anything, worse than its treatment of non-believers, who must be banished from the public arena lest they spread their heretical views. British philosopher and author Kathleen Stock resigned from Sussex University in October 2021 in the aftermath of a one-year-long despicable student campaign against her. As a gender-critical feminist, Stock has never hidden her views on transgender issues. Why would she ever have to? She defended her work as an academic and, in particular in her latest book, Material Girls, Why Reality Matters to Feminism, showing a strong belief in the importance and irreducibility of the biological reality of human beings. The last thing she had the chance to see at campus while walking down the Green Mile, leading to the class where she had taught for almost 20 years, was a lineup of posters being vandalized with the following slogans: Kathleen Stock is a spiteful bootlicker, Kathleen Stock is a transphobe, fire Kathleen Stock. The cleansing and purification of universities of their unorthodox lecturers is not new to modern history and should terrify everyone, especially liberals, as such. History and art as battlefields. According to hard-left fanatics, we either kneel to their dogmas, sometimes literally, as Black Lives Matter, BLM, demands, or we are expelled from their churches. The problem is that
By
their expanding
large
definition
mansions.
of churches is coming to include all public spaces. Their zeal for censorship is no less authoritarian because it is hidden behind a smokescreen of social justice activism. When the French Revolution set about rewriting history in the Reign of Terror, it invariably relied on myths. Their woke successors have no less of the fervor and are no less delusional and destructive. In both cases, a tiny minority that happens to control the levers of power decreed what it was to be on the right side of history. When history becomes propaganda, says the British historian and author David Starkey, I'm afraid you get rather bad history. I would add that when history becomes propaganda, what we get is bad fiction too. In theater and cinema, for instance, the line between fiction and reality is fine by definition. This is not a problem in itself, of course. What is problematic is when movies are confused or explicitly employed as political weapons to advance radicalized political agendas. Art is once again becoming propaganda, another worrisome reminder of dark times in the not-so-distant past. The Danish Girl, a film directed by Tom Hopper and released in 2015 to worldwide acclaim, is a perfect example of how this blurring of art into propaganda can alter the representation of historical facts. Loosely based on the 2000 novel of the same name by David Ebershoff, the movie tells the story of Danish painter Lily Elba, starting from the premises that she was the first transgender person to go through sex reassignment surgery in mid-1920s Copenhagen. This is fake news. Elba was in fact an intersex person who was found to have both ovaries and testes and went through a medical procedure to have the latter removed. This had nothing to
Isn't
do
it
with
funny that if
transgenderism,
there's more
nothing
than
to do
two
with gender
genders, why
dysphoria,
they have
nothing
to
to
pick
do with
one
pronouns.
or the other?
The fascinating and touching story of one of the first intersex artists we have a record of has been erased from popular culture and sacrificed on the altar of trans ideology. The hypocritical apology made in November 2021, nearly 7 years after released, by English actor Eddie Redmayne, who had played the role of Lily Elba while not being a trans himself, was, against stiff competition, one of the most absurd things to happen last year. As nothing but a web of farcical scenes. There could not be a more apt description of the current woke attempt to revolutionize language, history, common sense, and logic.
Are you fucking getting it yet?
So basically, that's the loony left. Still waiting for one of them to come in here. But as you can see, I think I understand why they don't want to come over here, because I will fuck them up. And they know it. So I think that's their reason for not coming over here. My favorite is... I still won't... I'm prepared for anything and everything. Sniffy Joe. Okay. I'll do some Sniffy Joe for you.
Seven major failures of Sniffy Joe's presidency. I had to keep the list manageable. A CNN poll in early February asked Americans what they thought of Biden's presidency and what he's done right since entering office January 20, 2021. The top answer by a wide margin, according to that poll, hardly likely to be skewed against Biden and Democrats, was nothing at all. Over half of those surveyed couldn't come up with a single success during Biden's first year in office. I'm hard-pressed to think of a single thing he has done that benefits the country, one respondent wrote, according to CNN. Yikes. When Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said in his speech at a conservative political action conference that Biden was off to the worst start of any president since the 19th century, he clearly was echoing the opinion of many Americans. Biden campaigned on a message of uniting the country, but the country seems more divided and fractured since he took office, except perhaps on appraisals of his job performance.
81 million
Biden is
votes.
now hitting record low approval ratings for a president at this point in his term. Americans are dubious about their leadership for a reason, since more than a few national challenges and outright catastrophes may be tied directly to the failures of this president and his political allies. Here are 7 of them. 1. Border crisis. Security at the southern border has been an ongoing disaster, though one barely given coverage by the legacy media. The massive spike in border crossings initially was excused by Biden allies in the media as a seasonal problem. It was seasonal all right, open borders season. Since Biden took office, a historic surge of migrants has crossed the border illegally in numbers that are the highest in decades. And the problem isn't abating. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, U.S. agents logged 153,941 migrant encounters in January. This was double the number of encounters the previous January, and quadruple the number from the January before that. Just 3 months into the 2022 fiscal year, the United States has already recorded nearly 500,000 southwest border encounters, Jordan Boyd wrote at The Federalist in late January. So far, border apprehensions in the 2022 fiscal year are on track to exceed 2 million, which would blow away the 2021 fiscal year's already record-breaking 1.7 million apprehensions. The federal government's fiscal year runs from October through the following September. What's remarkable about this problem is that it coincides with the Biden administration's messaging during the pandemic about doing anything necessary to end the threat of COVID-19. Americans in many places are forced to show their vaccine papers to go to a restaurant. The Biden administration tried to force Americans to get vaccinated or lose their jobs. At the same time, the Biden administration has been letting millions of people with no proof of vaccination, or proof of anything else, into the country. 2. Messy Afghanistan withdrawal. Biden's shambolic withdrawal from Afghanistan was certainly one of the low points of his presidency, and one of the low points of American foreign policy since
we
the
were
fall
winning.
of Saigon at the end of the Vietnam War. The Biden administration assured the country that the withdrawal would be orderly, and that the Afghanistan government was stable upon America's departure. We clearly had a massive failure of intelligence, since the Afghanistan government collapsed and the Taliban took over the country in just a few weeks. To make matters worse, as the crisis was unfolding, Biden seemingly was nowhere to be found. The world witnessed a massive fiasco, with videos of Afghans falling off departing planes in a desperate attempt to escape, but the administration kept quiet, then made excuses. Even reliably left-wing media figures began to question Biden's leadership and competence on this matter. Biden struggled to answer even the most basic questions about the botched operation without getting belligerent and essentially saying there was nothing he or his advisors could have done to prevent the catastrophe. When Biden took office, we were assured that the adults were back in charge. That's not what it looked like when administration officials were tested by its first real foreign policy crisis. Instead, they created a crisis of confidence in American leadership. 3. Return to energy dependence. The Afghanistan mess wasn't the only foreign policy debacle so far under Biden. Russia launched a major invasion of Ukraine in the days before the president's State of the Union speech. I had a loony leftist bring up Russia today when I shared a video about Trump. Loony leftists, can you answer a question for me? Why didn't Putin invade while his double fingers puppet was in office? He waited until your dementia patient was in office. Explain please. Unbelievably, former Secretary of State John Kerry, Biden's climate czar, said the situation in Ukraine is worrying because Russia will be distracted from staying on track to fight climate change. It's an illustration of just how misguided the Biden administration's priorities are. Although the ultimate blame for the invasion remains with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Biden strengthened Russia's hand with generally misguided energy policies. In 2018, during Donald Trump's presidency, the United States became a net exporter of oil for the first time in 75 years. Technological innovations, alongside the Trump administration's policies to open up more opportunities for drilling while eliminating regulations, dramatically boosted American energy independence and global influence on energy issues. Not only did this energy independence benefit Americans economically, it weakened the position of petrostates such as Russia. But the Biden administration shifted away from this strategy. It encouraged an increase in green energy projects at the expense of fossil fuels and nuclear energy. These renewable energy sources are a long way from meeting global energy needs. Biden put more regulatory burdens on the oil and natural gas industry, slowing its production considerably. And perhaps most dramatically, he shut down the Keystone XL pipeline project to move oil from Canada to the U.S. while effectively greenlighting financing of Russia's Nord Stream 2 pipeline to carry natural gas to Germany. These moves made the U.S. and its allies more dependent on Russian oil and natural gas. Biden now says the administration will pivot and place sanctions on Nord Stream 2. But what would things be like now if he had pursued a course that signaled the U.S. is committed to energy production and dominance from the get-go? 4. Authoritarian COVID-19 mandates. Remember when Biden said he would shut down the COVID-19 virus and not the economy? Well, most Americans now believe that COVID-19 is here to stay no matter what we do.
Remember when everyone said Trump was a fascist?
This after Biden reached beyond the powers of his office to force Americans to get vaccinated and tell states to enforce mandates. Yet, more people. Biden tried to force private employers and other organizations with over 100 or more employees to enforce a vaccine mandate, despite saying that he didn't think it was exactly constitutional. The Supreme Court agreed and struck down the executive order in January. Despite this kind of ham-handed Caesarism, COVID-19 has not gone away. The Omicron variant spread like wildfire in the winter months, and is only now receding after countless Americans, vaccinated or not, got sick.
We can thank Putin for curing
This development
COVID
certainly
because
undermined the
it's not a
justification
problem
for
anymore.
brutish
Ever
vaccine
since
requirements
he
and the
invaded
violation
Ukraine.
of civil liberties that was surely taking place. The result has been a collapse in the popularity of Biden's COVID-19 strategy. Even many Democrat-controlled states and cities are starting to drop vaccine card requirements and mask mandates. If celebrities can watch the Super Bowl in a crowded stadium without masks on, why can't we stop forcing children to participate in this farce? Americans are fed up and want to move on with their lives. 5. Crime surge. American cities have experienced an explosion of violent crime since the summer of 2020. It's a trend that shows in December, ABC News reported that a dozen U.S. cities had set homicide records in 2021. This trend coincided with,
By the
and
way,
almost
those are
certainly
mostly
was
blue
exacerbated
cities.
by, the defund the police movement. In fact, many Democrat-run cities made good on this slogan by defunding their police departments and stemming the use of proactive policing. No surprise that cities that defunded police agencies often make the list of places with the largest increases in violent crime. Now, some of these city leaders are changing their tune and restoring police funding after much of the damage has been done. This hasn't stopped reckless left-wing district attorneys, such as Chesa Boudin in San Francisco and Alvin Bragg in New York City, from selectively deciding not to prosecute crimes. Biden mostly has dodged the idea that radical policies embraced by his Democratic Party are to blame for this issue. Instead, Biden has pointed to the pandemic and guns as the cause of the sustained surge of violence and criminality, rather than the lawless riots and soft on-crime policies. The president said he thinks police departments should get more money, which some took as a sign that he had departed from the message of left-wing activists. However, Biden said in January that he thought police should get more money to hire psychologists and social workers, which essentially is what the defunding crowd has called for. 6. Rising inflation. In July, Biden said inflation would be a temporary problem that his administration had a handle on. I want to be clear, my administration
Do you people
understands
realize
that, when we
that
ever to
even
experience
Brazil has
unchecked
lower
inflation
inflation
in the
than the
long term,
United
that would pose
States?
a real challenge for our economy, Biden said. While we're confident that isn't what we're seeing today, we're going to remain vigilant about any response that is needed. Now we're well into the new year and, if anything, inflation is getting worse. For most Americans, inflation has become almost impossible to ignore. Even leading Democrats have acknowledged that inflation is getting out of control. In December, inflation hit 7%, the highest it has been since 1982. But this isn't the same situation as in the 1980s. We are on the other side of the wave, as the Wall Street Journal has noted. In 1982, inflation had fallen from its peak of 14.8% in 1980, the last year of Jimmy Carter's one-term presidency. Correcting course required tight monetary policies from the Federal Reserve and a quick but sharp recession to pull the country out of the spiral. Upon becoming Federal Reserve Chairman in 1979, Paul Volcker set out to crush inflation with tight monetary policy, Greg IP wrote in the Wall Street Journal. In combination with credit controls, that effort pushed the U.S. into a brief recession in 1980. Then, as the Fed's benchmark interest rate reached 19% in 1981, a much deeper recession began. By the summer of 1982, inflation and interest rates were both falling sharply. For decades of generally low single-digit inflation would follow. Today, inflation is rising, not falling. And it's been exacerbated by the policies of the Biden administration, rather than being lessened as it was in 1981 by the policies of the Reagan administration. Rachel Gressler, an economics expert at the Heritage Foundation, explains that Biden and his legislative allies are making a bad situation worse. having already stimulated greater demand for goods and services with $5.5 trillion in so-called COVID-19 spending while simultaneously restricting the labor supply through welfare without work policies and COVID-19 unemployment benefits that discouraged a return to work, the Biden administration and progressive lawmakers are pursuing more of the same. Their big government socialism Build Back Better Act, increased regulations, and command economy tactics would all exacerbate inflation. Biden is starting to change his tune about the whole temporary thing about today's inflation. But he chose this path, and now the country is paying the consequences. 7. War on parents. Violent crime is spinning out of control, but the Justice Department clearly doesn't see that as the real threat to this country. No, the real threat is parents who disagree with what's happening in their local schools. Parents around the country, even in far-left San Francisco, have been organizing in response to the misguided and often egregious policies of many K-12 schools. From the inclusion of critical race theory and similar racialized ideas in classroom curriculum to over-the-top COVID-19 restrictions that forced students to stay home for over a year or wear masks all day long, parents are fed up. The result has been old-fashioned self-government in action. However, the response from the left has been to call transparency a threat to democracy, demonize parents, and threaten them with an FBI investigation. In October, Attorney General Merrick Garland sent out a memo calling on the FBI to investigate violent threats against school officials and teachers, despite a lack of evidence of such threats. The Biden administration actually moved to treat parents as if they were domestic terrorists. It appears that Garland's memo was urged on by the National School Boards Association, which represents many local school boards. The association also receives a huge amount of money from teachers' unions. In addition, Garland's son-in-law is a co-founder of an organization that advocates culturally responsive training and other ideas associated with critical race theory. General's memo wasn't only an uncall to parents, it also appeared to involve some serious conflicts of interest.
Are you fucking getting it yet?
Are they fucking getting it? No, they're not, because I tell this shit every day. This is why they don't come over here, too, because they've watched other podcasts. I think probably parts of them. They don't watch them all. But, and they don't want to come over and get your ass kicked. Would you go to a place where you were going to be proven to be an idiot? Anyway, I think I'm going to call it a night since nobody's coming. I did send another invitation to a bunch of loony leftists. Nobody's coming over. I don't blame them. I mean, it's not what you know, it's what you can find out. That's the key to being smarter than the Nimrods that you're going against, right? Let's see here. I'm looking at, I got 145 plus 203 for the turd challenge. CRT, my favorite is, you have no idea what CRT is, and I have like a 2-hour video on what CRT is, and then I have another video on the lies that are CRT because I've done my research. So they try that, and then the Scandinavian socialism, always love that one. I have a video I made about that. I live in a partially socialist country because, yeah, Brazil's partially. They own the oil company, and they did own natural gas, but Bolsonaro privatized it. But before I go, I want to go through all 50, yes, 50 now, of the you're in a cult if, because it's now up to 50. This started with 10, and in order to add a new one, either one loony leftist or 3 loony leftists had to do it 3 or more times. So perhaps if they didn't do stupid shit over and over and over, Anyway, you know you're in a cult if you believe you are what your imagination says you are. Delusional, characterized by or holding false beliefs or judgments about external reality that are held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, typically as a symptom of a mental condition. 2. You believe obedience is strength. Better put that mask on, even though it's made of fucking paper. 3. You believe bravery is dangerous. 4. You believe victimizing yourself is powerful. 5. You believe self-responsibility is someone else's responsibility. 6. You believe reality isn't real. Delusional, characterized by or holding false beliefs or judgments about external reality that are held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, typically as a symptom of a mental condition. 7. You believe giving a baby a death sentence out of convenience perfectly fine, believing there's a mythical right somewhere in the Constitution. Delusional, characterized by or holding false beliefs or judgments about external reality that are held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, typically as a symptom of a mental condition. Putting a convicted murderer to death after a trial and conviction, just too much. 8. We use the euphemism fetus to hide the fact that it's a baby. Fetus, noun, an offspring of a human, or what is the offspring of a human called? That's right, a baby, or other mammal in the stages of prenatal development that follow the embryo stage. 9. You will utter the words over and over, follow the science, all while ignoring science. 10. Thanks to Jamie Lee Curtis, you don't know how many Oscars, who didn't know how many Oscars she'd won. They, them, can't count. 11. You will riot and protest to take a real black woman off a syrup bottle and a Quaker off a box of Quaker Oats, or oats named Quaker Oats, only to put a fake white woman on a beer can, all while saying, I can't believe they're so upset over a beer can. Bud Light parent Anheuser-Busch's stock has lost $27 billion over Dylan Mulvaney, who has left the country, by the way. Is in Peru, I guess. 12. You will call it bias that someone writes down the stupid shit you do after 3 times. 13. Let's see. If you get triggered because someone doesn't think you're special because you were born into one of the CRT-approved victim groups, they believe deeds and personal responsibility warrant pride. 14. Someone has to explain to you things you can be proud of. I served my country for 23 years, retired, wrote a couple books, raised 4 kids, can keep my sex life to myself, and graduated college with a 3.9 GPA. So what are you proud of? Loony leftist. Well, I gobble cock or eat the vag and tell kids about it. 15. We'll call someone a bigot because they don't bow down to the alphabet mafia. Maybe that's why you tell kids. Kids might be impressed. Loony leftist. Why can't you just leave us alone? Well, you're grooming and sterilizing children and cheating women, so... 16. Never tell anyone anything they're proud of. We'll just be triggered that people don't bow down to the alphabet mafia. 17. We'll insult someone's accomplishments when CRT is all you have. 18. Lost your shit over To Kill a Mockingbird and Huckleberry Finn, but are screaming about banning books with gay sex and masturbation in school libraries. 19. We'll add 666 to your username on your social media profile just to try to shock people. Unlike the other 1,000 people who have 666 on their username profile. What's hilarious, you're the ones who always bring religion into any discussion about grooming kids. 20. Will lie even with irrefutable evidence. 21. Being so filled with hate, you will groom, mutilate, and murder your own children while calling your opposition fascists. 22. Believes that out of 7 billion people on the planet, white, straight males are somehow oppressing everyone else. 23. Will lose your shit when someone points out that you're not oppressed, you're just stupid. 24. Will call Republicans racist while thousands of young black men die in Chicago and New Orleans who haven't elected Republican mayors since 1870 and 1932, respectively. Will refer to a biology book as right-wing propaganda. will lose your shit if someone actually uses proper English instead of your made-up pronouns. You will use a stupid emoji, meme, or GIF when confronted with common sense and facts. You've been normalizing mental illness for decades, but you believe it's a gun problem, not a mental health problem. 29. Run around screaming, "That wasn't real socialism!" 30. When you can't counter my copy and paste, you'll just use the words copy and paste over and over. And over. 31. Will set fire to someone's business while calling them a fascist. 32. Are the same people who say you can't indoctrinate kids to be gay with a book or a drag show, but continually accuse the church of doing that very thing, although religion isn't taught in schools and you're not forced to go to church. 33. When someone is simply talking science and common sense, you will try to bring religion into it. Well, you know, the church. Well, then, don't go to church. It's not against the law. Not going to school is. 34. Will use unrelated behavior to justify your sick grooming behavior. 35. Will call someone triggered while insulting them because you're triggered. Triggered. Caused to feel an intense and unusually negative emotional reaction. 36. You will scream January 6th while setting fire to someone's business. 37. You resort to insults as you can't handle the truth. Delusional. Characterized by or holding false beliefs or judgments about external reality that are held despite incontrovertible evidence to the contrary, typically as a symptom of a mental condition. Patients with schizophrenia may show dysfunctional impulsivity and impulsive aggression. 38. Will lose your shit when someone calls you woke, and to prove you're not, 38, I've changed this. 38 will lose your shit when someone says you're in a woke cult, and to prove you're not, you do the things on this list over and over and over. 39. Will accuse your opposition of that which you are guilty. 40. You think wearing a mask to hide your face in your profile picture doesn't make you look stupid at all. Occupy Spokane. Will call someone a racist for telling you not to commit arson because the loony left likes to burn shit down. 42. Will call science hate speech. Way to go, Facebook. You know, DNA is not hate speech. It's science. 43. It will not occur to you that if people can simply copy and paste their counter arguments, you might be programmed, like in a cult. 44. Will call someone of color or someone married to someone of color a bigot. 45. Consider chemically castrating a pedophile horrible and inhumane, but chemically castrating a child just dandy. 46. You believe Joe Biden is a good president and isn't corrupt at all. 47. When any topic on this list other than politics is mentioned, you bring up Trump. 48. If the sight of the American flag triggers you, but you're too much of a coward to leave. I originally wrote it as, but you're too much of a pussy to leave. 49. Will admit you don't read, but don't know that you are or why you're ignorant. And I always add this, say this in your best Sling Blade voice. Which means I has to read so's I won't be stupid. 50. Will babble incoherently to each other about the best insults to call conservatives. I was going to add 51 just for this one person because she said stupid shit just repeatedly. If 51 would be if your hair extensions cost more than your education. But, yeah. So, yeah, that's an hour 19. I'm going to kind of sit here. If anybody wants to get in on the, I've invited a bunch of loony leftists over again while I was actually talking, and ain't nobody said shit. So, or come over because, well, would you if you knew you were an idiot? And I'm still waiting for, it'd be great if they come over. I'm trying to get it to 2 hours. Like, I want 2 hours. I want people to come in here. They can be pissed off. You're a fucking well, prove it. That's the point. You have to prove, you have to back up what you say. And that's why they're not here. I'm gonna get into this Nordic country bullshit because I'm tired.
There's a tired old argument from Bernie, AOC and other socialist wannabes that Scandinavian socialism is working. It's a utopia. That would be true if they were actually socialist. First, we need to establish the definition of socialism. It is state ownership of the means of production and distribution. Like Venezuela, where people are eating their pets and garbage. So, let's get down to the facts. Nordic countries aren't actually socialist. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden shouldn't be held up as socialist utopias. Nordic countries are often used internationally to prove that socialism works. It's true that social democratic parties are enjoying success in this part of the world. Yet while Nordic countries are seeing a partial comeback for social democratic parties, their policies aren't in fact socialist but centrist. Nordic nations and especially Sweden did embrace socialism between around 1970 and 1990. During the past 30 years, however, both conservative and social democratic-led governments have moved toward the center. Today, the Nordic Social Democrats have adopted stricter immigration policies, tightened eligibility requirements for welfare benefit systems, taken a tougher stance on crime, and carried out business-friendly policies. The Nordic welfare system that people like to point to as a flourishing example of socialism was developed around 1970, when there was a policy shift throughout Nordic societies toward higher taxes and generous public benefits. In the century preceding that turn, Nordic countries had combined small public sectors and free markets to achieve strong economic growth. From around 1870 to 1970, for instance, Sweden's per capita GDP increased around tenfold, the highest growth rate in all of Europe. It was after this period of rapidly growing prosperity that there was a shift to high tax policies. The public remained skeptical of direct tax raises, and the shift largely occurred through gradual rises in the indirect payroll tax. It wasn't an unusual trajectory. Researchers have shown that countries with higher trust levels tend to have larger and more generous welfare systems. And trust and social responsibility have historically been strong in this region, in part due to the need for collaboration in the unforgiving Nordic climate, stronger, indeed, than in the rest of Europe. As a result of the shift away from low-tax policies, however, economic growth stagnated. Over the past 50 years, for instance, Swedish GDP per capita has only grown by a factor of 2.1. More importantly, the norms relating to hard work and responsibility have started to erode, according to measurements by the World Value Survey, as welfare has increased. For example, in the early 1980s, 19% of Swedes agreed that it could be justified to some degree for someone to claim public welfare when they weren't eligible. This share gradually increased to 40% in 2011, and it has since fallen to 36% following stricter control of welfare systems and public campaigns warning against overuse.
What do you think it is in
Today,
America?
Nordic
like 80%?
nations still have higher taxes and more generous welfare systems than most parts of the world. But since the 1990s, Sweden and other Nordic nations have focused on strengthening those norms of social responsibility again by increasing the control of public welfare systems, reducing generosity in the welfare models, and lowering taxes. Indeed, many Nordic policies now promote free trade and free enterprise. The Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom, which measures how capitalist a country is by studying regulation and taxation in different areas of the economy, ranks Denmark and Iceland as the 10th and 11th most capitalist countries in the world. Finland comes in at 17th, Sweden at 21st, and Norway at 28th. By comparison, the United States is ranked 20th. Property rights, business freedom, monetary freedom, and trade freedom are strong in the Nordic nations. This move toward the center is playing out in electoral politics, even as social democrats are winning elections again. Nordic social democrats, for instance, are increasingly relying on forming alliances with parties in the middle. Take Finland. In the 2019 election, incumbent Prime Minister Juha Sipilä, the leader of the Center Party, lost to the Social Democratic Party's Antti Rinne. But Rinne had to form a broad coalition government including the Center Party, which has, for example, pushed not to raise total taxes. Sweden, the most populous Nordic nation, has followed a similar trajectory. Social Democrat Stefan Löfven has served as Prime Minister since 2014. In the Swedish political landscape, though, only a minority of voters support the three main center-left and left-wing parties, so Löfven has relied on support from the right-of-center party and, previously, the right-of-center Liberals party. In early 2020, Löfven's government abolished the Värnskatt, a 5% tax on the highest incomes, significantly reducing the marginal tax rate. Other recent reforms include the partial privatization of the state employment service and becoming tougher on crime. One of the Social Democratic Party's main focuses this year, for example, is abolishing the punishment rebate for young criminal offenders, which would lead to longer sentences for those committing multiple offenses. The Social Democrats have also promised tax cuts as part of their platform for the 2022 elections, where the party will likely be represented by Magdalena Andersson, Sweden's finance minister. Social Democrats in Norway find themselves in a similar situation to their Swedish counterparts, having to cooperate with a center party that opposes socialist policies in order to secure power. And there are more signs that Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store's Social Democratic Labour Party, which just defeated incumbent Conservative Prime Minister Erna Solberg in September's election, will govern with more centrist policies than some might expect. Store is a millionaire who was previously affiliated with Norway's Conservative Party. Moreover, he was a state secretary and chief of staff in 2000 and 2001, when the Social Democratic Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg oversaw widespread privatization policies. Nordic social democratic parties have also had to modify their migration policies, as their working-class voters have shifted to more conservative parties that push for migration control. In Denmark's 2019 general election, when Social Democracy Party leader Mette Frederiksen defeated the center-right incumbent to become prime minister, she gained support on a platform that combined traditional social democratic policies with a strict immigration policy. In an effort to outflank the populist right, the ruling Social Democrats have adopted one of the harshest refugee policies in the world. Nordic nations' electoral politics mirror broader trends away from socialism over the past few decades. In the 1970s and 1980s in Sweden, for instance, the state monopolized elder care, healthcare, and education. As schools were taken over by the state, the education model shifted away from adult authority, and pupils began to lead their own learning. Pupil-led education became an important part of Sweden's socialist policies, and remains one of the main holdovers of that period. But since the 1990s, the government has allowed the private sector to have a larger role. Sweden currently has 823 private schools, mainly operated as for-profit companies with public funding.
In the
Some,
States, with
such as the
everything
school
going
chain
on,
Internationella
that may be necessary
Engelska
now.
are offering teacher-led rather than pupil-led education, with considerably better results than the public schools. Healthcare is also gradually moving away from public monopolies. As of 2019, more than 40% of the 1,100 health centers of Sweden are run by private, for-profit actors. While Sweden has universal health care, private sector employees are increasingly covered by private health insurances paid by their employers. In the capital region of Stockholm, 62% of elder care home visit hours are carried out by private, for-profit companies. The old state-run systems do live on in parts of Sweden, for example in the northern region of Norrbotten, where only 2% of elder care home visits are carried out by for-profit companies. But the welfare models are increasingly giving way to more centrist ones, with a role for both the private and public sectors. Sweden's pension system has also gradually become more connected to individuals' work performance. Part of citizens' pensions is invested in the market, and individuals can choose to invest in pension savings products from numerous private firms. Complementary private saving through employers is also becoming more important in future pension income. Throughout the region, pension reforms have included stricter rules for early retirement, a flexible retirement age, and a closer link between earned wage and accrued pensions. Much of the strength of Nordic societies lies in the advanced free market system. These are the trends that are contributing to the economic and social success of Nordic countries once again. It's simply a common misconception that favorable social outcomes, such as long life expectancy, and even income distribution, are a direct result of their welfare systems. In truth, these advantages largely evolved well before the rise of large welfare states. As Swedish economists have shown, Sweden had an unusually even income distribution in 1920, and equality continued to grow until 1980. The lion's share of income equality growth thus occurred during the free market era, predating the rise of the generous welfare state. In another study, economists showed that income equality in Denmark has increased since the 1920s, with much progress happening before the shift to higher taxes. Much of the strength of Nordic societies lies in the advanced free market system, which is why it's essential that they are returning to their centrist roots. Sweden is a leading innovation hub in Europe that's able to attract foreign capital to growing companies. One reason for this success is its smart tax policy, where funds from a successful investment in one company may be invested in new companies, and taxation only applies when gains are realized. Thus, growth capital can be attracted to a high-tax country. There are many reasons to admire the Nordic model. Sweden has the highest concentration of brain business jobs among European Union countries. As Bloomberg explained earlier this year, Stockholm has bred more tech unicorns per capita than the rest of the world outside of Silicon Valley. Nordic nations are successfully combining entrepreneurship with a shift toward green energies, where governments work with the private sector to push for environmental sustainability. Ultimately, the comeback of social democratic parties in the Nordic countries can be explained by their focus on centrist solutions to the greatest problems nations face today. It is centrist pragmatists, rather than socialists, who should hold up the Nordics as role models worldwide.
So, yeah, when they say Nordic countries, socialism Nordic countries, no. My favorite, though, is when you're debating a socialist, communist wannabe who's never been to a socialist or communist country, by the way. Well, what, you don't like Social Security? You mean the Social Security that's projected to be bankrupt by 2038? Way to hold up another failure, you socialist asshole. Holy God, oh my God. Way to make yourself look even dumber. And then, you don't like having police? You mean the police you wanted to defund? How about fire departments? Then why do we need volunteer fire departments? You see how this, or how about the military? The military is a job. You sign a contract with the government. You're basically signing up to do a job. It's a job. You're working for the government. You're not an elected official. It's a job. So, for a service you provide, they give you money. That's called capitalism. They're taking some of your money to give to me to do a job you don't want to do. That's called capitalism. I agreed to do the job you didn't want to do because you didn't want to get fucking shot. That's called capitalism. So you're paying me to do what you don't want to do. That's called capitalism. That's why there's a contract involved. I had to sign a contract, actually multiple contracts. I had to sign contracts with you, the people, through the President of the United States and Congress and all that bullshit. But it's basically the President, to do the job you did not want to do because you were a pussy. That's basically what it is. Which, I don't care if you joined or not. As long, the one thing I'm tired of hearing, I would have joined, but. You would have joined, but you're a pussy. Let's just say it. Just come out and say it. I didn't want to get shot. Cool. Got it. Not everybody's meant to do that job. But don't make excuses. Just say, I didn't want to get shot. Okay. Actually, you probably sound smarter than I do. I joined because, well, I didn't want to get shot either, but the money was decent and it was free health care, so fuck it. Anyway, on that note, I think I'm going to end this podcast, and hopefully, maybe we can get some loony leftists in here, get some, like, just some fire. I want some fire in here. Holy shit. All I do is drink beer, and, like, we need some fire. But anyway, on that note, I think I'm going to end tonight's podcast, because it was me and Grumpy, and he's probably gone to bed. Or if he hasn't gone to bed, he's not here. But, yeah, I'm going to call it a night on this one. Maybe go over to Facebook and see if I can get some family to talk to. I do that on Saturdays as well. Monday, I have my test for my just my permit. 45 hours just to get a permit so I can train to drive, be taught to drive. Here's the book I had to go through. Holy shit, 45 hours. Yes, I found out it's 45 hours, not, yeah. So Monday I have my 30 question test. I can get 9 wrong, and then I can get my permit to drive. Woohoo! And then I can learn to ride a motorcycle and drive a car. But we'll we'll see you next Saturday. Hopefully we can get some fire in here, some loony leftists who have some courage. But so you guys have a good week, and hopefully see you next Saturday.